Well, first of all, Ricardo, thank you very much for including me and for organizing this symposium. It's some excellent talks, and it's really a pleasure to get to know people in your country a little bit better. So thank you very much for including me. It's a great day. I also want to thank Professor Salameo for his tribute to William, who was a great friend and mentor and leader for our specialty. And I think you said a very elegant tribute to him that we were all thinking of. Thank you. And then finally, it's always difficult to follow Pat. He presents elegant science, a lifetime work. And this is kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum, but we'll see how it goes. So my research in hydrocephalus has been clinical over the years, and we created a network that you see displayed here to conduct hydrocephalus research in children over the last 10 or 15 years. And we have participating centers around Canada and the United States. We have 14 centers right now. And there are many different study protocols that we're working on, but this large number of centers really has accumulated a huge number of patients and procedures. And it's allowed us to publish quite a number of articles, obtain grant funding. And so we've really enjoyed working together, learned a lot from each other, and I think been pretty productive with large trials. But what I want to talk about today is a little bit different, and I don't think it applies just to pediatric neurosurgery. But the question is, what's the result of all this? And I found this, and I like this, which says that the latest research shows that we really should be doing something with all this research. And so the topic really is, how do we go from discovery? I mean, there's many excellent papers being presented today. How do we go from doing that, and they end up in a journal somewhere, but often it stops there. How do we keep going so that all this work we're doing has an impact on patient care? And how do we implement the findings of all these studies that we're doing? And this is very related to quality improvement. And I'm sure that anybody working in healthcare these days has been impacted by this movement of quality improvement, which really started, at least in North America, with a report 20 years ago that said that, at least in the US, and this has come out in other countries as well, we do the right thing about half the time. And even though maybe we know a lot about what we're treating and what we should do, we don't always apply it. And so the quality improvement movement says that if we do things that we know will work and we do them consistently so that we reduce variability, that then our outcomes will improve. So how do we do this? How do we improve what we're doing? It's not just a matter of trying harder, because we are human, and all of us make mistakes every day. We forget things, and this isn't intentional. This is just human nature, and we can't change that. But just trying harder isn't going to do it. So this is from the business world. You can change the work environment. You can reduce our reliance on memory. You can simplify things and standardize them and develop standard protocols. And you can create constraints and forcing functions for things that we do in our workday. And this doesn't apply to everything, for sure, especially in neurosurgery. But it does apply to the things that we do over and over and over, such as, I think, shunt surgery. So the basic paradigm for this quality improvement movement is that you have a standard protocol for how you do something, which reduces variation, and that very commonly improves outcome. And this is without discovering anything new. It's just using the things that we already have in the literature. Well, when you develop these things and talk to people about it, they say, well, that's cookbook medicine. You can't tell me how to practice. That's just a recipe. And, you know, I learned how to do it this way. And so I think I ask people to try and remember is that there really is no protocol that fits every patient, because every patient is a little bit different. There's really no protocol that really fits any particular patient, but it is just a common baseline. So if we have a standard common baseline, and then there are additional things going on, we can learn from them. So we record these other factors that people are doing, their own particular way of treating the patient, but working from a common baseline. So I'll show you an example of this, which we've done several times in shunt surgery in our network to reduce the variation in how we do the surgery and hopefully to reduce the infection. And this is not new. We heard already today, Dr. Cardiel talking about how to do the shunt surgery the same way every time. And Professor Shooks, who I think is on the meeting, has been talking about a standard protocol for shunt surgery to be done the same way every time. And he's been talking about that for years. So this is what we did within our network, and the details, the content of the protocol are not super important. There were 11 different steps that we asked people to follow. We developed the protocol with the neurosurgeons, with the OR staff, with the infectious disease experts, with the pharmacist in the operating room. And we looked at all different factors that we might standardize, and we came up with this protocol. And then we asked people to implement it. And we had, before we started the protocol, we had this infection rate. And you can see these are months across the bottom. There's some variability up and down, but it was 8.8% before we introduced this standardized protocol. And then again, you still have some up and down, but it went down to 5.7%. So a nice finding, and this, as I said, is without using a new drug, without using anything new, just implementing the things that were in the literature and doing it consistently. Well, that was interesting, but we then looked at individual infection rates at the different sites. And so you can see here that this is the number of cases at the different sites. And 75% of the operations, they followed every step in the protocol, which I was pretty happy with. There were 11 steps. So 75% of the surgeries followed all the 11 steps. But we still had a huge variation in infection rate from 1 to 12%. So they must be doing something in addition to the protocol that differs from one site to another. And that's what I was talking about earlier. When you have a common baseline, but then you record these other factors and seeing how, because you have a common baseline, you can then measure the impact of these other factors. And so what was going on, this was quite a while ago, was the antibiotic impregnated catheters were coming into the market. Their use was variable. It was not part of the protocol, but some people were adding them anyways. And 2 sites in particular were using them consistently, and their infection rate was 3.5. It was half of the infection rate of the sites that were not using the antibiotic impregnated catheters. So you revise the protocol. So we got this new information that maybe the antibiotic catheters help. You revise the protocol, and then you start a new one. So this is a continuous iterative process where we discover something, we revise, and then we go forward. And we've done that several times in our network. So this was the original protocol, starting from an 8.8% infection rate, that took us to 5.7. We changed the protocol. The old one had vancomycin and gentamicin injected into the shunt. We dropped that off the protocol, and we included antibiotic impregnated catheters. It ended up about the same, 2,000 patients, 6% infection rate. And then a lot of people in our network said, let's just make the core protocol quite simple. Let's just use these 5 things: IV antibiotics, chloroprep, scrubbing your hands, not using the antiseptic cream, double gloving, as we heard earlier this morning, IOBAN, everything else is optional. So we just finished doing that, 5,000 patients, 5.1% infection rate. So it ended up about the same, just using these basic 5 things. When we look at these optional things, and this is something that we're just working on, this is the initial analysis. This has not been published or peer reviewed, but if we look at it this way, the 5 steps was the basic starting point. If we added, and this is in the recent 5,000 cases, if the surgeon added vancomycin and gentamicin, it really didn't have an impact on the infection rate. If they added antibiotic impregnated catheters, it looks like it does help, 4.9 versus 8.1. If you had both the antibiotic and the vancomycin and gentamicin, it was as good as doing nothing. I'm not sure why, but if they did the antibiotic impregnated catheters and irrigated the wounds with a vancomycin solution at the end, then we're down to 2%. And then if we put all these data into a multivariate statistical model, and I don't do this, we have statisticians in our research network that do this for us. So the things that increase the risk of infection were if the child had complex chronic conditions, and there's a pediatric list of those, they're all different organ systems. If they had 2 or more complex chronic conditions, that significantly increased the infection rate. If they had surgery in the previous 12 weeks, that independently increased the infection rate, and that makes sense to us clinically. And then these 2 things were independently protective. Vancomycin irrigation was strongly protective, and the antibiotic impregnated catheters were protective to reduce infection rate. So as we did before, we go back now, and as I said, this is not peer reviewed or published yet, but we're working on it. And we go back to our protocol and we modified it. So the original 5 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now we're going to add the catheters and we're going to add the vancomycin irrigation. And there's also a randomized trial in England looking at the antibiotic catheters, and so there's quite a bit of evidence that they help. So that's how we've been doing this, and this is all within our research network. And these are centers that are interested in hydrocephalus. They have research coordinators, they have funding. So this is a very focused group. And this group is not only doing this study, but we're doing many different studies in hydrocephalus, some randomized trials in a couple of areas. And so there's a lot of stuff going on, which is fine. But I want to go back to my original question. What do we do with all these results? And again, the latest research shows that we really should be doing something with all this research. So back to this, how do we go from all this discovery, we're doing it, you're doing it, we go to our national meetings, our international meetings, everybody's presenting results. How does this impact patient care? And these authors reviewed the process of starting with a new idea, doing the research, getting it published, getting it into guidelines, getting those implemented into changing practice. And they said that it realistically on average can take about 17 years, which is too slow. And that's kind of what we've been doing in our network. We've been doing all these studies that I described, including this quality improvement thing. And then we just put it out there in the journal and say, I hope they like it, I hope they do it, which is gonna take us 17 years. So we've started a new model and we're just getting going on this to try and take the positive findings to centers that treat these children, but maybe don't want to be part of a big, strong research effort. They just want to implement it into their practice and see if we can help the children that are being treated at those sites. So this is an extended network called HCRNQ for quality. It's focused specifically on quality improvement. The idea is that things that we discover in the core network, we will try and implement in a much broader basis and a lot larger number of hospitals around North America. And that this is just minimal data collection. All we need is enough data to risk adjust. And that anybody who wanted to participate could join this, and people are still joining it. So the main network has 14 sites. This new quality network, anyone can join. Instead of emphasizing the investigation component, we're looking at implementation of findings. And so instead of extensive data collection with a full-time research coordinator, there's minimal data collection, just one page. We use common definitions. And as I say, this is a QI effort that is very focused. So it's a little bit different. What do the sites get out of this? Why would anybody want to do this? Well, we give them, they get their own infection rate compared to the other sites in the country. We give them their own raw data. They get access to new protocols. They get input into the development of new protocols. And I think that locally this would be popular. Their hospitals should like it. Their local community should like it. They're participating in the improvement of the quality of their care. And we'll have several of these protocols. They don't have to participate in all of them. So we've been doing this a little over a year. We have 30 sites. 8 more are joining, going through the IRB process. In the first year, we have 1,500 shunt procedures, and you can see the breakdown here of the different types of shunt procedures that are being collected. So that's how we're trying to have a broader impact, rather than just putting our results in a journal and hoping people do it. We've now, at these 30 sites, we have 1,500 cases, and we've found that across the 30 sites, the infection rate is 6%. We're now going to go to them with the results of this analysis that I just showed you. As I said, it's not peer reviewed or published yet, but that we're working on that. And we're going to recommend that they follow a protocol like this. And the data form that we've been using to collect the data won't change. We will just tell them that we are now going to monitor compliance with these steps. And then we'll remeasure, and we'll see, does implementing a protocol on a broad national basis have an impact? And so that's what we're trying to do. So I've been very worried about doing all this research and not helping patients. And so this is our attempt to have a broader impact, basically find something that works, implement it widely, and then measure again. That's the model. So I'll stop there. A little bit different than some of the topics today, but that's what we've been up to in our network recently.